Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee. What would make a successful middle-aged husband, father, and college professor go from a short, neat haircut to wearing dreadlocks? What was his life like before dreads, and how did it change after his transformation? Was he making a statement or just like the style? And how did others react? Let's ask him. Author Bert Ashe is our guest today. He wrote the book Twisted, My Dreadlock Chronicles, which examines not only his personal journey, but a lot about American culture. Our conversation on Another View begins right after this news from NPR.
Discussing today's topics from an African-American perspective, this is Another View.
Happy Friday, everyone, and welcome to Another View. I'm Barbara Ham-Lee, and I hope you are enjoying this kind of dreary Friday, but we're going to have a great conversation today, so I hope you will enjoy it, and thank you so much for joining us. Whether it's straightened, twisted, cornrowed, afroed, extended, or dreaded, it's a topic of conversation and fascination, especially from those who do not have black hair. Usually when we talk about black hair and its many facets, it's from a female perspective. But what happens when an African-American man makes a dramatic change in hairstyle? That's what our guest today did. He made a change, and he wrote a book about it called Twisted, My Dreadlock Chronicles. His name is Bert Ashe, and we welcome him to Another View. Hi, Bert. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good.
I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. So this happened when you turned 39 years old, and my first thought was, oh, this is just a midlife crisis. Was it a midlife crisis?
I don't think so. It's entirely possible that there was an aspect of crises involved, but it was more exhaustion with what I'd always been and wanting to do something different. But I have to admit, when it comes to the timing, it does look suspicious.
So let's take our audience back a little bit, because you had been thinking about dreadlocks at various points in your life before you finally took the plunge, as it were.
That's right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
So tell us how you got interested in them in the first place.
Well, there's something about the style that I just find aesthetically pleasing, just on a sort of attraction to something that looks appealing. And I was way too into the fairly conventional persona that I had when I was 18 to even consider it. And I had plenty of company at the time. I'm 18 in 1977. Hardly anyone was wearing dreadlocks at that time. And I was somebody who was aware of reggae and was vaguely aware of the Rastafarians. But it seemed like it was something that they, quote unquote, do, and that it wasn't something that was an option for me. And so what I had to do essentially was to grow older, grow into the possibility of wearing the style, and also seeing a lot of people around me, not a great number, but, certain people, Vernon Reid of Living Color, or Whoopi Goldberg, I use as an example in the book, who are wearing the style. And my argument is that somebody like Whoopi, who was not a reggae musician, was not Rastafarian, was not Jamaican, kind of gave me and others what could be called cultural permission to wear the style. And even then, it still took me another 14, 15 years to find my way to actually doing it.
Because before you actually started getting twists first and then going into dreads, you were a pretty conservative type guy, I guess. Would you describe yourself that way?
I would. Now, the word conservative has certain political meanings that I never signed on to.
Oh, yeah, that's true. But I was talking about in terms of dress and hair.
in terms of dress, in terms of hair, in terms of comportment, in terms of the way of moving through the world. Pretty conservative guy. You're not going to turn your head and look at me in 1989, 74, and see something that would cause you to say, that's interesting. I've never seen that before, or that looks unusual. I sort of faded into a kind of normalcy that I didn't really feel represented how I felt inside, but I was way too conventional in terms of the way I projected that persona to be able to have anyone notice in any way, shape, or form.
So you're in academia. You're an associate professor at the University of Richmond. So you did a lot of research on dreadlocks before you actually took the plunge also. Is that because of your academic background, or were you just really that curious?
Both. I was definitely curious. My academic background gave me the tools and the ability. But I didn't really do the research before I got locked. It was really around the time that I decided to grow dreadlocks that I began to look and to figure out what the history of the hairstyle was and what the cultural impact of the hairstyle is. It all kind of happened all at the same time. It was a sort of mania. You could use the word obsession if you wanted to. That I just sort of dove into the question of dreadlocks at the same time that my hair was growing long enough to get twisted, and then getting twisted, and then growing into actual locks themselves.
So let's talk about exactly, because there may be some people in the audience who don't quite understand what dreadlocks are. So can you just describe what the hairstyle is?
It's when the hair on an individual's head grows out and intertwines with other strands of hair in ways that locks that hair together as a result of not combing it and isolating it so that it's a sort of single lock of whichever thickness one might want. And it eventually grows into this sort of this thing that is connected to your head, and as a result of not combing and not brushing and not attending to it, but just sort of twisting and reinforcing whatever thickness of that amount of hair that you want, it kind of grows out of the head as a sort of, I mean, we use the word lock. There's really no other word I could use. So that and it's the unusual person out there, I would imagine, that hasn't seen someone, unfortunate homeless person who, hasn't been able to have the sort of hygiene that they might want, and their hair locks as well because they're not doing anything with it. They've got other things on their mind. But when you're someone who is doing it intentionally, then what you do is you wait for your hair to grow long enough, and then you twist whatever thickness you want into a kind of, isolated instance of hair, and then it sort of locks together because the hair is growing out in a circular fashion.
Right, and African-American hair, black hair, as they say, grows in a circular fashion, which makes the locking happen, but it takes a long time.
It does. It takes a heartbreakingly long time. and you just, the uncertainty, and this is something that everyone who has dreadlocks understands on some level or another. You want it, you're hoping for it to happen, you're sure on some level that it will happen, and it just seems like it never happens. And then before you know it, it's happened.
And it is not something that, because I think a lot of people think with dreadlocks, okay, you just wake up one morning and decide I'm never going to comb my hair again. And but there's actually a major process that you have to go through on a fairly regular basis in order to achieve the style, first of all, and make it look the way that you want it to look. Yeah,
there really is. And it takes diligence, it takes paying attention, it takes a kind of certain repetition tenacity. I mean, it may sound like I'm overblowing what it takes to have the style, but there are a lot of people who finally manage to gain the look, the hairstyle after trying 2 or 3 times, because it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness, if you will.
Stick-to-itiveness. And once you get locks, the only way to get rid of them is to cut them. Isn't that right?
That's right.
Yeah,
yep.
Let's cut them out. 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240 are the numbers to call to join our conversation. Do you wear dreadlocks? Do people treat you differently because you're wearing dreadlocks? What has been your experience? Give us a call and join our conversation with author Bert Ashe, the author of Twisted, My Dreadlock Chronicles, 440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. So, Arthur, Bert, tell us about the history of dreadlocks. Where did they come from?
Well, there's a modern, contemporary history that emerges directly out of the Rastafarians in Jamaica, and it's their adopting of the hairstyle, and then having people in Jamaica, and we're talking about 1950s, thereabouts. Rastafarians were on the island of Jamaica before then, but they didn't immediately wear dreadlocks. That was something that sort of developed in that their approach to the religion. But the actual hairstyle itself goes back thousands of years. There are a lot of different types of people in India, in a variety of different countries and religious faiths, and the Egyptians, for instance, wore dreadlocks and dreadlock wigs, by the way. So it's a hairstyle that's been around for quite some time, but when it comes to the way that we think of dreadlocks in the present day, it pretty much stems from Rastafarian beliefs in Jamaica in the middle to late 20th century.
And so when it became familiar and attached with the Rastafarian movement, it also took on, in some people's minds, some negative connotations?
It did. But look, I mean, my research tells me that those negative connotations were part of what the Rastafarians wanted. It was a hairstyle that they more or less intentionally adopted, that would allow them to be separate from and apart from what they called Babylon, the kind of conventional Jamaican culture that they wanted no part of. They wanted to be separate. They wanted to be outside. And they adopted a hairstyle that would mark them as outsiders in some very distinct ways. So, were there negative repercussions? Sure, but in some ways, I wouldn't say that they welcomed the negative repercussions, but it's certainly nothing that surprised them.
Because they wanted to be separate. So then when Bob Marley, who became the most famous Rastafarian and who also wore the style, then it also took on the connotation, or as someone described it, of either smelling like marijuana or patchouli oil.
Yeah, that good old Juliana Rancic of Fashion Police, or whatever that show is called. Yeah. That is it's amazing how that point of view has adhered itself to the hairstyle and stuck like glue from the first time that anyone saw the style right up until earlier this spring.
This spring, exactly.
Yeah, and the Rastafarians, as part of their enactment of the religion itself, do smoke what they call ganja or marijuana, and the connection with marijuana and the hairstyle seems like it's. I see no sign of it abating anytime soon.
Were you worried about that since you're a professor? You've taught at the College of Holy Cross. You got your doctorate from William and Mary. You're at the University of Richmond. I mean, did that concern you as you started growing your dreads? The impression that some people have?
No, it didn't concern me. I knew that it was going to be part of what was going to happen when I lost my hair. But what I find fascinating about the hairstyle and adopting the hairstyle is that clash between that persona that I have had since I was a little kid, of being a sort of sartorially and personally conservative sort of person, who then wears this hairstyle that is so completely, just wildly at odds with who I presented myself to be earlier. I felt like there was going to be some kind of mediating way, that there would be some sort of happy medium, some sort of way that I was going to be able to, excuse me, I was going to be able to present myself in a way that was authentically Bert Ashe, and at the same time wear a hairstyle that was completely and totally at odds with that self, and then walk in a more or less contested fashion on Earth, and it was going to be what it was going to be.
Oh, my goodness. Our phone lines are lit up. Let's take a couple of calls. Jay joins us from Virginia Beach. Hi, Jay. You're on the air.
Hey, how you guys doing?
All right. How are you?
Good.
Pretty good. I have a few points to make, so I hope I don't get cut off.
Okay. Make them quick.
My wife has not brushed her hair since 1988 and let her hair lock up on its own. And she's a very spiritual person and has chose to let them go the way they go, not to create a certain size, but let it do its. And it's a spiritual reason. And she really prefers to call them locks, not dreadlocks, because dread indicates a negative connotation even on yourself. And so that's the first point. The second point is our daughter, who, when she was 12, decided she wanted to brush her hair and not have dreadlocks anymore. And they were down to, the middle of her back. And my wife spent every night for about 2 or 3 weeks brushing and combing and getting it through. And she was able to brush them out without any problems. So you don't have to shave your head. And the third point about it is they are clean if you clean yourself like most people do. My wife washes her hair regularly. It doesn't smell like marijuana because she doesn't smoke that. It doesn't smell like patchouli because she doesn't like that. It smells like shampoo. There's no issues if you have good hygiene. And the main reason for dreadlocks is to remove yourself from a negative society and say, I'm detached from all these things that you guys are for. I had dreadlocks a few times, and until she told me, the dread brings in a negative connotation, don't use it, I used it that way. But the first time I cut my hair off, it was one. I had my head shaved, and it was one solid mat with, 20 or 30 different strands. But it's not a negative thing. It's becoming more acceptable, just like tattoos or anything else.
Hey, Jay, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Just so that I'll make sure I'm clear on this. Are you African American? Was your family, anyone in your family African American?
No.
Okay. And my point being that anybody can dread. That's the reason why I'm asking you that. Yes.
Yeah, and that's the main thing. If you don't brush your hair, but you continue to wash it and treat it like you normally would, but you don't run a brush through it, eventually it might take months, but it will lock up. My hair usually does after, if I cut my hair and I don't put a brush through it after about 6 months or so, it starts locking up. It's just a normal process.
All right. Let's let Bert answer, and thanks so much for your call, Jay. We really appreciate that. Bert, in your book, you talk about DREAD versus DRED and LOCK versus LOC. So can you talk a little bit, that's going to Jay's point about the thought about what dread means and so forth?
Yes. Well, look, what I find interesting is this there's a concept called, and I'm sure you've heard of it, the politics of respectability, in terms of African American culture, and the idea that how we present ourselves is in some ways a kind of ability for us to push back at the kind of pernicious stereotypes that are floating around in terms of how African Americans are perceived in American culture. And it's been this way for many, many years. Since long before freedom came, there had been these stereotypes about African Americans. And what some I'm not talking specifically about Jay and his wife, I'm just sort of talking in general right now, the way that some African Americans react to the reality of these pernicious stereotypes is to comport themselves in a way that they believe that how they move through the world combats those stereotypes. And what sometimes happens is that some black folk will essentially live their lives within this question of the politics of respectability. It's just that the question for me always is, are you doing what you want to do? Or are you doing what you feel they, quote unquote, should see so that they have an opinion of you that's better than you think that opinion often is? The reason I go into all this is because this question of DREAD versus DRED and this idea that those who wear dreadlocks have to somehow make sure that everybody understands that they're clean, or that there's that there's nothing dreadful about my hair, all of that is, to me, wrapped up in this tension between African Americans and the politics of respectability. And it's a game that I refuse to play, or at least I refuse to play it on the conscious level. When I hear people say, and I hear it a lot, you shouldn't say dreadlocks because it's negative. My world doesn't exist in a kind of positive-negative binary. That world is too small to me. And what I want to do is to move through the world as Bert Ashe, as best he can project what it is that he is, and not be overly concerned with what other people are thinking as they look at me. Now, I know that it's more of a desire than a reality, because I live in the world just like everybody else. But that's the tension that I saw and I sort of grapple with in the book. And as a result, I absolutely call my hairstyle dreadlocks. I call it proudly dreadlocks. I don't think of the term as a negative term, and I respect those who do, but respectfully disagree.
Okay. So what about your family? How did they react to your decision? First, let's start with Val, with your wife. Has she grown to like them? Did she like them?
She liked them. She was always partial to the style.
Okay.
She was fine with it. She never wanted to do it herself, but she was perfectly happy. My mother probably had the biggest problem. And she was good enough not to burden me with the problem that she had. It was probably my father that heard the brunt of how she felt about the hairstyle. But other than that, even though I've been conventional, I've always been somewhat of a kind of quirky guy who sort of saw the world in a more or less unusual way. So those people that knew me in terms of family, surprised a little bit, but not too terribly surprised.
Okay, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Bert Ashe, author of Twisted, My Dreadlock Chronicles, and he's taking us on his journey from short hair to dreadlocks. I want to read something to you, Bert, out of the book, and this was a conversation, listening to your wife tell you a conversation she had between herself and your daughter, Jordan, in the locker room at Assumption College after the kids' first swimming lesson. So, why does Daddy have dreadlocks? Because he wants them. He likes how they look. Will he always have them? For as long as he wants them. Why? Long pause. I want the old Daddy back. Does she still feel that way?
She does not. No, she doesn't. She loves the hairstyle as well, and has done quite a bit of experimenting with her own hair. As a matter of fact, as I speak, her hair is about, I don't know, a quarter of an inch long.
Mm-hmm.
And she's now, 23 years old and is no longer a child. But yeah, she took some time getting used to the hairstyle.
It took a
back
while.
then.
Let's go to Rachel in Virginia Beach. Hi, Rachel. You're on the air.
Hi.
Hi.
So I just wanted to make reference to, again, the statement about being able to take them out. I am African American, and primarily there is...
Rachel, we can barely hear you. I think there's a problem with the line. Can you try to speak up a little bit?
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there's just a lot of crackle in the line.
Yeah, I noticed that, too. I apologize.
Okay.
But I'm an African American, and I would say that it depends on how, in my experience, the dreadlocks are formed. But I was able to successfully comb them out over some course of time. So a lot of people have told me that not only do you have to have short hair to get them started, but that you have to cut your hair to remove them. And I found that both of those things are not the case. So as far as dispelling that is concerned, I just like to say that.
Okay. Thank you, Rachel. We appreciate your phone call. Any reaction, Bert?
It was just a couple of months ago that I became aware that one could, through diligence and determination, figure out a way to get rid of dreadlocks without cutting their hair.
Okay.
One of the things that I love about black hair in general and dreadlocks in particular is that I never know everything.
Exactly. There's always something new to learn.
Absolutely.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Sharon joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Sharon. You're on the air. Sharon, are you there? Okay, maybe we lost Sharon. There's another Sharon. Sharon, are you there?
Yes,
Hi.
I am here.
How are you?
Hi, I'm great.
Good.
Wonderful conversation. Appreciate the research, and I look forward to reading Mr. Ashe's book. A lot of people have pointed out some of the points that those of us who've had locks for most of our lives, being 40, 50 years, that you can comb them out if you want to, but I think a lot of people have made that point. But my journey started from wanting healthy hair. As an African-American woman, from going from the Afro years to then lots of work, so I cut it, and then that means you'd have to have teeny-weeny afros. So my desire was, well, I want my hair longer. What do? I don't want chemicals. I want to be able to swim when I want to. So as I saw other people who weren't necessarily did not have the Jamaican or the religion, then they said, well, just stop brushing it, curl it up, twist it, and your hair will lock. And it did. And it is a very healthy way of wearing our hair in lots of different designs and different styles.
How do you how do you take care of your hair, Sharon?
Well, I twist it and I wash it.
So twist it and wash it.
It's really no different. I think the questions that we get is from people seeing that it's very, very different. And so some of the questions are because it's different, they think it means for you that you're very different. I'm no different than anyone who chooses to go to the beautician and get a perm. I just choose to have this different hairstyle. So I'm not making any political statements.
Okay.
My statement is that this is the way I choose to wear my hair.
Great. Sharon, thanks so much for your call. I appreciate that. And Arthur, Bert, I keep calling you Arthur for some reason. Bert, you said the same thing. You're not necessarily making a political statement with your hair.
Not necessarily. The thing is, though, I completely understand why this previous caller would say that she's no different than anyone else, and that this is simply how she wears her hair. Yet, at the same time, when you take steps to have your hair be something that is simply not conventional, and by conventional, my best example is newscasters or news anchors or people whose job it is to stand in front of a camera or sit in front of a camera and talk to the American public about serious issues, news, commentary, what have you. How those people look is important, because if they don't look a certain way, then the audience is simply not going to see them as credible. Those people are the ones that present a kind of American conventionality, and I'm talking about white folks, and I'm talking about black folks, and I'm talking about Asian folks, and what they wear and how they wear their hair and how they speak is a kind of common American understanding that allows them to talk about the news and talk about opinions in ways that we will accept and find credible. And how they're dressed and how they wear their hair is a huge part of that. That's why you don't see people in dreadlocks anchoring the national news or the local news, at least not normally. And so when you choose to wear a hairstyle that, say, a news anchor or a news reporter couldn't wear and be credible, you are saying something about yourself, even if you feel you're no different than anyone else.
Okay. And so do people, how is your credibility level then in terms of the people that you come in contact with? Do they question your credibility because you have dreads?
I don't think so.
If they do, they haven't told you.
Yeah, they haven't told me. I mean, and one of the things I talk about in the book is the sort of happy coincidence that dreadlocks in the academy is seen as something of a professorial look, and therefore does not push against my credibility or my sort of scholarly professorial authority in any sort of way. It's
because
sort of seen as,
professors are kind of quirky anyway, right?
That's exactly right.
440-2665 or 1-800-940-2240. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about dreadlocks. Elena joins us from Norfolk. Hi, Elena.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, how are you?
Great, thank you. This is a magnificent show, as yours
you.
always are. I'm really grateful, thankful for you and what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Love the show. I have a couple comments.
Sure.
First off, as a black person of the African diaspora, I was born in the Republic of Panama, of black parents of West Indian background, grew up speaking Spanish and English. So coming to the United States and living here, I found that many experiences concerning hair seem to be the same universally. As a black child, I spent too many Saturdays consecutively at the hairdressers getting my hair straightened. Wasted time. The results were so ephemeral. They were gone in a minute. You couldn't get wet. You couldn't swim. You couldn't do all these lovely things that were so much fun. Then came dreads. Then came the locks. Total freedom. And it was as a gift, because I'd seen a little clip as a very young person of Ethel Waters with her natural hair and kinky hair grown out, and she was brushing it in this tiny little clip. That thing impressed me so much that I wanted that in my old age. And this thing brought that to me.
Wow.
I was able to wear my own hair, let it grow as long as it would want to, and enjoy it and feel beautiful and not be constrained by all these conventions.
So, Elena, how long have you had your locks?
And that was one of the points I wanted to make, as people have asked that, because they're now sort of at the top of my hip.
Oh, wow.
I've been growing them as long as Obama has been running. So it was about probably the end of 06 or 07, and they're still growing. And I feel that it is somehow a little tribute to his grace and scholarship and the excellence of his performance.
Okay.
So I feel a little connectedness through this piece of myself to him.
Fantastic.
And somehow, as I care for them, I offer it as thanksgiving to the effort, the work he puts into doing such an excellent job.
Okay, Elena, thank you so much. We appreciate the phone call. Go ahead,
I'm
Bert.
wondering if when he leaves office, is she going to cut her locks?
Elena, you still there? He says,
Yes,
are you going to cut him off when he leaves office?
No, the plan is to be a 90-year-old woman with them dragging behind me with nests and little bird's nest and little twigs and pieces of nature in them, in my high heels with my cane, and not caring about any of it except how much fun it has been. So
Absolutely.
fear no man. Wear your dreadlocks.
Thank you, Elena. We appreciate the phone call. Thanks so much. That is true. That is great. That is great. So your response to her in terms of, she made a change also. And one of the things that you talked about in the book, Bert, is not only did you change your hair, but then you had this kind of crisis about your clothes.
Yep.
And so talk about that a little bit.
Well, one of the funniest things I heard didn't concern me. One of my best friends that shows up in the narrative, Lindsay, considered growing dreadlocks at one point, and he mentioned to a friend of his, a female friend of his, that he was going to grow dreadlocks, and she said, "You can't grow dreadlocks. You'd have to buy a whole new wardrobe." The idea is that nobody who's walking around today, wherever they are in the country and in most of the Western world or beyond, is wearing a hairstyle but no clothes, in the same way that whoever is out there walking around in whatever clothes that they're wearing has something or has cut off whatever would be growing out of their head. And there's a kind of complementary relationship there, a kind of yin and yang between what you're wearing and how it relates to your hairstyle, or how it doesn't relate to your hairstyle.
Okay, so what were you wearing when your hair was short, and what changed once you grew your locks?
I was pretty much wearing jeans, T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'd wear sneakers. Sometimes I wouldn't. It was. There's a term that I heard a couple of months ago that sort of speaks to it. The term that they used was urban camouflage.
Okay.
And the idea is there's a certain way that you could dress, and then you go out of your house and you walk amongst everybody who's out in the world. And if you wear what everyone else is wearing, you sort of fade into this populace, and you don't stand out. Nobody notices you. It's what you've got on, and in a sense, you are camouflaged in an urban space by virtue of the fact that you're not wearing anything that's unconventional or unusual.
Okay.
I pretty much wore that, whatever you would call that. And what I wanted to do, ideally, would be to go whole cloth and wear the sort of clothes that the people that I saw wearing dreadlocks would wear, the kind of mud cloth and the sort of flowy clothes and the golds and the greens and the
purples and so forth.
And and I could not. I never really even tried, because it simply wasn't something that was possible. One of the things I discovered that was a kind of a pain is that if you're deciding to grow dreadlocks and you commit, day by day, you're monitoring progress or you're longing for the process to be over, but you're not changing. When you have a clothing aesthetic, you have to make decisions every day in terms of what it is that you'll put on. You take it off at night. then the next day you have to make a decision about what it is that you put on. Again, it's much more hands-on in terms of what you think you might do with whatever clothing aesthetic you want. And it sort of demands that you have a if not a comfort level, a kind of set, a sort of setting for what you could wear inside what you feel like your acceptable clothing is. Mm-hmm. And so mine turned out to be a kind of black jeans. I decided not to wear any more sneakers outside ever again. I decided I didn't want to wear blue jeans. It was really more of a process of elimination more than anything else. And then what was left was what I decided I would wear.
The photograph that's in the paper, that in the Richmond Times-Dispatch, I believe it is, you have on a checked collared shirt. So,
yes.
So you are wearing collared shirts now. And what happened? And what happened to the tie episode? You went through a phase where you were going to wear a tie no matter what, whether it was appropriate or not.
Right. Yeah, I did try that. I wish that it had lasted longer. What I discovered was it was so far out of American expectation that everyone thought that I was at work, no matter where I went. If I was in a store and I was wearing a tie, people would walk up to me and say, do you have this book in stock? Or, what size do I look like? And it was clear that the signal that I was sending off was, I'm at work. And the reason I must be at work is because why the heck else would I be wearing a tie in, 1998?
So that didn't last very long.
That didn't last very long.
Here's a question I have for you, though, because, as a almost 39, 40-year-old man, you're talking about growing dreads when most men in that age range are kind of looking at, am I going to go bald?
Yeah.
So was that a concern of yours that, at some point your dreads were going to recede or, anything like that?
No, I guess I hit the genetic lottery in the sense that male pattern baldness was not an issue. Still isn't. I'm in my mid-50s now, and going gangbusters with the hair and the fact that it's all there. Doesn't even seem to be thinning really all that much. Mm-hmm. So no, I was happy that was. At least that was something that I didn't have to be concerned about.
Now, you talked about how once you grew your dreads, you killed the style. What does that mean? What does that mean? Why do you say that?
Well, it's a sort of tongue-in-cheek way of measuring the tension between a hairstyle that historically is seen as rebellious and pushing back hard against convention. Mm-hmm. And my question was, if in fact somebody who is as conventional as I was in terms of my persona and my dress and my way of moving through the world, if I was to adopt the style, then one of two things was going to happen. Either I would be seen as rebellious and pushing back hard against convention and inhabiting fully this hairstyle that is so different from the norm, or I would drag that rebellious hairstyle into conventionality, and hence I would kill the style and in terms of what it meant and what it was supposed to mean.
So you think you've dragged it into conventionality. So when you're in a store or something, do people come up to you and say, can I touch your hair?
They do not.
They do not. Interesting.
No, it's the weirdest thing. That is one thing, and you talked in your introduction about how the majority of books that are written about black hair are by black women.
Right. And
one of the things that I'm finding out is the huge glaring difference between my experience in my book and other people in their books is that I don't have people coming up and asking me to touch my hair. I've never really had a hair touching problem. I think that might have something to do with gender. I think that might have something to do with age. The fact that, when I got locked, I was 40, and I've been locked for years now. And like I said, I'm in my mid-50s now, and I'm a man. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if those two factors prevent people from asking to touch or unwanted touching in ways that quite frankly, you read the book. I didn't talk that much about it because
right,
it wasn't an issue for me. My son had that incident at Disneyland, but again, he was a little boy, and so it's very strange. I think that's one of the differences between a man writing a book about black hair and a woman writing a book about black hair. I'm sure there are others, but that's one that immediately jumps to mind.
So in the 2 minutes that we have left in this interview, tell me what you would say to someone who is considering dreading their hair.
Oh, first and foremost, I would say go, do it. If you want to do it, do it. It's absolutely fascinating. The second thing that I would say is pay attention. Mm-hmm. I will admit that I'm a curious guy, and that when something attracts my attention, I sort of bore into it with almost unhealthy detail. But it's a really interesting process, not just in terms of the hair on your head, but also in terms of how you're perceived and what the world looks like and how people react to you in one way or another. Okay. It's utterly fascinating. And I had a wonderful time with it.
Well, I know that you will let your dreads continue to grow, and that's a great thing. The book is called Twisted, My Dreadlock Chronicles. It actually will be released on June 9th by Agate Publishing. And I want to thank you very much, Bert Ashe, for being with us and sharing your journey with us.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to add that the book is actually available now on Amazon.com. If, in fact, someone wants to go straight to Amazon and buy a copy, they'll get to them in a couple of days.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate
for having
it.
Me.
All righty, take care, and we'll be right back.
Hello, this is Spike Lee. What's happening? And you listen to Another View, 89.5 FM on WHRV.
Adrienne Cowan is a woman on a mission. Her goal, to help former inmates begin a new life outside of prison walls and succeed at it. Our Lisa Godley takes a look at Cowan's amazing journey from honor student to inmate to head of a company that in just 3 short years has helped hundreds.
Adrienne Cowan grew up an only child and was thrilled to be able to go to the college of her choice on scholarship.
My first year there, I had gotten with the wrong crowd. I met some young ladies there and we began to room together. And so one of the young ladies, she said, I need to use up my checkbook so I can get a new one. So we're like, okay, cool, that sounds fun. A shopping spree, all of us want to go on that. So it just went on and on and on. Eventually, we were in a department store and the detectives apprehended me and the other person whose information I was using. She let me take the entire rap for everything that was going down. So at that particular time, they had charged me with 10 counts of forgery and uttering.
Cowan says as she matured, she moved forward with her life, getting married, becoming a mom, and looking ahead. Then she was blindsided.
My husband left, so I was left with a 1-year-old, and we had to do a lot of survivor techniques. So eventually it just literally got out of hand. In 2009, I was charged with a bad check for grand larceny. It was for a van I had tried to purchase, and they had sentenced me to 2 years in one place and 15 months in another.
She says the hardest part about being locked up was being away from her daughter.
So out of the years that I did, I was never called to visitation, but maybe once. It was Christmas, Thanksgiving, and holidays, and it kind of just left a bad taste in my mouth. But I remember praying about it, and I remember that the voice spoke and said, you need to channel your pain to be able to help others once you come on the outside.
Cowan named her program Kingdom Staffing. She started with nothing, but now 3 years later has 15 vans that she not only uses to transport former inmates to and from work, but to take families to see their loved ones on the weekends.
The most intriguing thing to me was when we took a lady to Fluvanna to see her daughter she hadn't seen in 5 years. And to see them interact with each other after not seeing each other for so long, that was the most remarkable experience I ever had. She wasn't able to get there. So when she got there, even the guards were amazed at how it transpired because they didn't have the transportation to get to see each other.
She says she loves what she does.
Riding with me is not like riding any other ride you're going to ride. When you get into one of those vans, we talk about everything from religion to life to family to forgiveness to love. It's everything. And so I hear people tell me in the morning when they're going to work, they're like, Miss Cowan, we love riding with you because you're so much fun and you encourage us every day, you know. And I call them the breakfast crew because I get up so early to get them and they talk about all of the things they're going through throughout their day. And I tell them that life is not easy, you know, but whoever said it was going to be. You know, it's just your determination, and I promise you, if you put one foot in front of the other one going to follow the first foot that you put in front of that one.
Another component of Cowan's program is mentoring.
I want them to understand that you cannot depend on anybody but yourself. There are going to be many people that's going to drop the ball because they have not been in your shoes. They do not know where you're coming from, and it's not going to mean as much to them. And so it's challenging to get housing. It's challenging to get a job. It's challenging even getting your children back. Everything is harder for you because society doesn't forget. But in that, you channel your frustrations to your determination. Your determination is that just because they said no doesn't mean it's not an opportunity somewhere else. You can't just give up because the first thing we do is the minute that we're told no or a promise is not kept, we start getting low self-esteem, resorting back to what we know to do best. Because there's going to be a lot of promises that are going to be made, but what I want them to understand is you have to come out here with the mindset, if nobody helps me, I'm going to help myself. I'm going to be determined to find a way to meet my goal.
For Another View, I'm Lisa Godley.
Wow, Adrienne is very, very passionate about the work that she does, and we wish her the very best moving forward. That wraps it up for this edition of Another View. If you'd like to hear the show again or share it with a friend, go to our website, anotherviewradio.org, and download the podcast. You can also sign up for our eView newsletter, a once-a-week reminder of upcoming shows, and please like us on Facebook. We're actually gaining more likes, so that's a great thing. Next week, it's the June edition of the Another View Roundtable. I'll let you in on a secret. Will Leviste and Bill Thomas have been engaged in intellectual debate every day since the last roundtable, so you know it's going to be an exciting show. And before I leave you today, I want to say a very, very special congratulations to Miss Jessica Yowell. She is the daughter of our producer, Lisa Godley, and she is graduating tomorrow from Nansemond River High School. I remember when Jessica was born. So Jessica, we're so proud of you. Congratulations. Our theme music was composed and performed by Jay Sennett. Lisa Godley is our show producer. Victor Bowen is our audio engineer, and Chantel Davis answered our phones. I'm Barbara Ham Lee. Make it a great weekend, everyone, and let's get together again next Friday at noon for Another View.